Good morning. Thank you for coming down to our press conference today to announce that l'Association pour la revendication des droits démocratiques, we have filed our appeal to the Supreme Court yesterday. Basically, we have a motion in front of the courts that seeks to declare the first-past-the-post voting system unconstitutional. To give you a brief history of the case, it was filed initially the motion in 2004. We went to court for the admissibility. It was judged admissible. We went to the Superior Court and then to the Appeal Court. Unfortunately, in both instances, the judge did not grant our motion. And basically, the essential question that we're asking of the courts is that we're saying that the first-past-the-post system does not respect the charter rights of effective representation and of meaningful participation in the electoral process. Nous avons fourni la Cour avec l'évidence empirique, aussi des témoignages experts qui disent clairement que le mode de scrutin ne conforme pas aux exigences de la Charte, mais malheureusement, on peut dire que les juges dans les deux instances ont décidé de donner beaucoup plus de poids au témoignage de le procureur général, et à cause de ça, nous croyons que nous avons la base pour avoir notre appel entendu par le Cour suprême. Today, I'm joined with two of our supporting groups. They have filed for the intervener status at the Quebec Court of Appeal. They have the intention of doing so as well if our case is heard by the Supreme Court. And I'm supported by none other than Elizabeth May, of course, the leader of the Green Party of Canada. And on my left, we have Wayne Smith, the Executive Director of Fair Vote Canada. And just in case you're wondering, my name is Brian Gibb. I'm one of the litigants. And as well, we're joined in the room with us is Patrick Daoust. Without any further ado, I'd like to pass the microphone to Elizabeth May, the leader of the Green Party of Canada.
Thank you, Brian. I won't take long. I want to leave enough time for Fair Vote Canada to put forward its concerns. I stand as a litigant in this matter in my individual capacity, but obviously the Green Party of Canada has a tremendous amount of background and history as a party that has persevered and has continued to enunciate for Canadians how the first-past-the-post system, not only, of course, it's very disadvantageous to a national party such as ours that doesn't start with a regional bloc, isn't based on regional divisions to break into the Canadian mainstream of representation in the House of Commons, but my concerns are far deeper. First-past-the-post system delivers unfair results. The first-past-the-post system accentuates a political discourse that's hyper-partisan because you don't want, as the leader of one party, to be seen to be respectful, cooperative, and in fact even liking leaders of other parties, because you must always have your elbows out because it's the first-past-the-post system, and if you know that on voting day people are going to be struggling with strategic voting, therefore it's important to demonize everyone but your own party. The Green Party actually finds this so distasteful. The other part of first-past-the-post is that it discourages the number of women in politics. If you want to look at countries around the world that have 40% women in political life in their Houses of Commons, in their legislatures, they're the countries that have proportional representation, and it also increases the proportion of visible minorities. So I'm very happy to join this action, hoping the Supreme Court of Canada will take a look at this and decide that first-past-the-post is unfair. Pour un petit résumé, c'est évident que le système uninominal est vraiment inégal et antidémocratique. Et on doit changer le système pour voter, pour encourager les Canadiens de faire le vote. Dans les dernières élections fédérales, nous avons seulement 60% de Canadiens qui ont voté. Ça, c'est un niveau très bas et c'est à cause de la réalité que dans la politique, dans la vie de politique, ce n'est pas vrai, ce n'est pas la réalité que chaque vote est important. Pour nous, comme le Parti vert, c'est très important d'encourager tous les Canadiens, particulièrement les jeunes, de voter. Et pour ça, je suis très fière de joindre mes collègues dans l'Association pour la revendication des droits démocratiques. Et aussi, maintenant, je donne la parole à la représentation équitable au Canada, Wayne Smith.
Thank you. Thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you all for coming. Canada's Charter of Rights guarantees us the right to vote, and the Supreme Court of Canada has ruled in previous decisions that this doesn't just mean the right to put a piece of paper in a box. We are guaranteed the right to effective representation. But under the current single-member plurality, or first-past-the-post voting system used for all our federal and provincial elections, most of us are represented by somebody we actually voted against. We currently have a so-called majority government that received less than 40% of the votes cast in the last election. And this is a perfectly normal situation under this voting system. Our election results are always horribly distorted, sometimes to the extent that the party with the most votes loses the election. La Charte canadienne des droits et libertés garantit notre droit de vote et des décisions intérieures de la Cour suprême confirment que ce geste n'est pas aussi simple que de déposer un morceau de papier dans une boîte. Le droit à une véritable représentation nous est garanti. Assujettis au présent mode de scrutin nominal à un tour utilisé lors de toutes les élections fédérales et provinciales, la plupart d'entre nous, Canadiens, sont représentés par une personne pour qui nous n'avons pas voté. Dès lors, nous avons un gouvernement dit majoritaire, ne disposant de l'appui de moins de 40% des électeurs qui ont enregistré le vote, une situation tout à fait normale selon le système électoral en vigueur. Les résultats électoraux sont toujours horriblement faussés, au point qu'il est possible qu'un parti politique puisse perdre une élection, même s'il a amassé le plus de votes. Furthermore, the Charter also guarantees the equality of men and women, but our current voting system throws up barriers to the election of women and minorities. This can easily be seen by looking at other countries around the world. Every democracy that has at least 30% women in its legislature uses a proportional voting system. Canada now has 25% women in our House of Commons. It's more than we've ever had before, and it's about as good as it gets with this type of voting system, but it's still a national disgrace. En outre, la Charte garantit également l'égalité des hommes et des femmes. Cependant, notre présent système électoral freine l'élection des femmes et des représentantes des minorités. Il est aisément possible de mesurer ce phénomène en jetant un regard sur la situation dans d'autres pays au travers le monde. Au sein de toutes les législatures composées d'au moins 30% des femmes, ces pays tous utilisent des modes de scrutin proportionnels. Au Canada, 25% des membres du Parlement sont des femmes. C'est là le pourcentage le plus élevé que nous ayons obtenu et probablement le meilleur que nous pouvons espérer compte tenu de notre système électoral. Cela ne demeure pas moins un déshonneur. Élaborer une telle cause devant cette Cour de justice constitue un processus dispendieux qui réclame également beaucoup de temps et d'énergie. À cet égard, nous soulignons le courage et l'abnégation des personnes qui ont mis sur pied l'association pour la revendication des droits démocratiques. Utilisant le propre denier, depuis des années, ils ont lancé ce défi pour améliorer la démocratie au Canada. Il leur est maintenant nécessaire d'obtenir un soutien financier public et le mouvement Représentation équitable au Canada est fier de faire part de sa décision de verser un montant égal au premier 10 000 $ reçus. C'est une somme modeste si cela devait signifier que chaque Canadien puisse être véritablement représenté au Parlement, que celui-ci sont le reflet de la diversité de notre société et que les électeurs de ce pays aient finalement le pouvoir de rendre responsables de leurs faits et gestes les politiciens et les partis politiques, un pouvoir qui nous a été promis par la Charte des droits et libertés. Mounting a challenge in the courts is an expensive and time-consuming process, and we salute the courage and self-sacrifice of the individuals who make up the ARDD. They have been paying for this initiative to improve Canadian democracy for years out of their own pockets. Now, finally, they're asking for donations, and Fair Vote Canada is proud to announce that we will provide matching funding for the first $10,000 of donations received. It's a small price to pay if it means that every Canadian can be represented in Parliament by somebody they actually voted for, that our Parliament will accurately reflect the diversity of our society, and that Canadian voters will finally have the power to hold politicians and political parties accountable, a power promised to us in the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. Et maintenant, monsieur, je vais vous donner ce chèque pour 10 000 $.
Thank you very much. Much appreciated.
Et maintenant, des questions?
Wondering if, Wayne Smith, if you could expand on how the Charter has been interpreted more broadly about that it's not just about putting a ballot in a box.
Yes, there have been. There have been a couple of cases in front of the Supreme Court, notably one in which one of the small parties they wanted to change the rules and require a party to have 50 candidates in order to be a party, and so it was during this case the Supreme Court and I believe it was Justice McLaughlin.
Saskatchewan reference.
Yeah. They determined that all it says in Article 3 is Canadians have the right to vote, but this means that we're actually entitled to effective representation, and that's the phrase that was used. And what we say is we don't get effective representation when most of us are represented by somebody we voted against.
And I'd just like to add, so there are some glaring examples. For example, each and every individual is guaranteed the right to effective representation. One of the most stunning examples was in the previous federal election, not the latest, is that you had approximately 1 million people that voted for the Green Party of Canada with no representation whatsoever. So how can you square that? And I would even go further. For example, in 1987, in the New Brunswick general election, the Liberals got 60% of the vote, and they received all of the seats, 100% of the seats. It's very difficult to square the fact that, and really the problem is first past the post is the only voting system in the world that uses a way of translating votes to seats that does not aggregate votes or voting preferences. It's just simply a plurality, and most of the votes are discarded. The second point in terms of the jurisprudence, because Wayne was absolutely right, is that it's only the right to vote is mentioned in Article 3, but it's in the jurisprudence from the Supreme Court. The second case is also in a McLaughlin court, was the Figura decision, in which besides meaningful effective representation, meaningful participation in the electoral process. And I can tell you as a former Green candidate, one of the most difficult parts is that you do the work, and is that people know that if they know their vote is not going to count, they either vote strategically, I'm not going to say all of them, but a certain percentage, a large percentage will vote strategically, or even worse, they don't go to the polls at all. Now this is something that we've shown, the empirical evidence is that in an election, a small party can anticipate to lose to 2-3% of its vote, and if you only have less than 10%, that's a significant portion, and this is not something that large parties who offer government options are subject to.
Seen first past the post challenged in any other country and through the legal system?
Yes. In fact, in the United States, in a state court, it was, I'm just trying to think if it was in Maryland. I can't remember exactly which court. It was in the 1990s. And it was found to be to contravene. In the United States, the right to vote is not guaranteed by their Constitution, we learned in the Bush decision, but it was the Voting Rights Act. And it was judged to contravene the Voting Rights Act, and it was in the state legislature, and I'm not sure if it was, I believe it was either Maryland or in some. I'll have to check. I have that on my iPad if you want to know the exact decision. The other thing I'd just like to mention is this type of, if you want to say, to go the judicial route to change the voting system, this also, to have a constitutional, to question the constitutionality, this has also happened in Japan. And as a result, the voting system was changed. They decided, the judges in their Supreme Court decided that their voting system was unconstitutional. So this is not a first.
You might add to that the court is clearly... Sorry, if you want, I'll ask you to the microphone. You can add to that.
No, you have to.
To the microphone. I have to go to the microphone.
Yes.
This is Patrick Dou, another litigant.
The court has clearly deemed that the voting system is subject to judicial review. And that was a question that was asked. The Procureur Général du Québec had put forward that our motion should be